Stop everything right now, because what you have been calling normal tiredness is not normal at all. And what you assumed was just another exhausting stretch of life is actually the residue of something far larger than you were ever supposed to consciously notice. You didn't just get tired. You didn't just feel drained. You survived something that most minds were never meant to remember. Exactly 96 hours ago, something massive happened to you, something that your day disguised perfectly behind routines, responsibilities, sleep schedules, unfinished messages, and ordinary distractions. Yet beneath all of that, an infernal panic was unfolding across invisible levels of reality. High-ranking demonic commanders were activated. Emergency protocols were triggered. And a chosen one, the very kind they have spent centuries trying to locate, had just destroyed 1,000 of their elite agents in a single coordinated engagement. That chosen one is you. Right now, there is a war you were never told about, a classification you were never briefed on, and a truth that has been deliberately suppressed since the moment your subconscious defenses activated. There are only 17 like you in this cycle who carry this specific resistance pattern. 17. And if you feel that strange, unexplainable exhaustion that sleep doesn't fix, if your body feels like it ran a marathon your memory cannot recall, that is your proof. Subscribe to this channel if your instincts are already reacting before logic does, and comment 777 if your fatigue makes no sense at all. Because what follows will explain who the 1,000 attackers truly were, why exhaustion is not a weakness but evidence of victory, and why you were quietly reclassified as Omega. The day it happened looked exactly like every other day. You woke up with your mind already half filled with plans, problems, and obligations. You moved through familiar rooms. You checked the same screens. You answered the same kinds of messages. You handled responsibilities that did not feel heroic in any cinematic sense. You ate, you worked, you waited for sleep. Nothing dramatic announced itself. There were no flashes of light in the sky, no voices in the walls, no tangible sign that anything outside the ordinary was happening. Yet that very ordinariness was the camouflage. While your physical body moved through familiar space and time, invisible dimensions overlapped your steps with surgical precision. The atmosphere that day contained a coordinated infernal military operation so tightly layered into normal reality that even sensitive minds would have dismissed it as mood swings, bad luck, or stress. This was not metaphor. This was not poetic language. This was not symbolic psychology. This was an actual documented infernal strategy, one reserved for targets labeled Elimination Priority Omega. That label does not get assigned to people with ordinary influence, ordinary resilience, or ordinary spiritual structure. It is assigned when lesser methods have already failed. They deployed 1,000 against you because the smaller numbers were no longer enough. Previous attacks had already been tested. You survived moments that crushed others completely. Situations that were designed to fracture identity, purpose, and willpower did not neutralize you. Instead of breaking, you adapted. Instead of freezing, you recalibrated. Each failed attempt forced an escalation on their side. Infernal calculations measure collapse through probability, not morality. 1 attack is considered resistible. 10 create destabilization. 100 approaches the edge of psychological impossibility. 1,000 is classified as guaranteed collapse. That level of deployment is only authorized when a target demonstrates a resistance curve that exceeds all known behavioral predictions. Their logic was perfect. Their strategy was flawless, and yet it still failed. You won without even knowing you were fighting. Your conscious mind lived a normal day. You carried on conversations. You completed tasks. You felt moments of boredom, irritation, brief satisfaction, passing worry. While that surface layer played out, your subconscious spiritual system engaged in full autonomous combat. You did not need to visualize anything. You did not need to pray certain words. You did not need to know what was happening. Your internal structure simply responded the way a fortified immune system responds to an invisible virus. Every one of the 1,000 was annihilated automatically. What you felt afterward as exhaustion was not ordinary tiredness. It was post-war collapse, the moment after the battlefield goes quiet and the body finally registers what it survived. And now, layer by layer, you can understand the nature of what was sent against you. The first wave arrived as whispers of doubt so subtle that most minds accept them as their own thoughts. Tiny suggestions of inadequacy. Quiet questions that felt like self-reflection but were actually distortions. False humility that pretended to be wisdom. Automatic self-rejection disguised as realism. These entities attempt to slide beneath conscious awareness and rewrite internal narratives from the inside. 99% of their influence never reached your conscious mind because your inner filtration system rejected them instantly. You did not spiral into self-hatred. You did not lose your sense of worth. The whispers found no fertile ground. Then came the amplifiers of fear. They do not create fear from nothing. They locate existing concerns and inflate them until they dominate perception. They show visions of financial collapse, loss of loved ones, public humiliation, total future failure. They flood the nervous system to force survival panic and irrational decision-making. Yet your nervous system remained regulated. You felt concern without catastrophe. You maintained rational control, even when scenarios were being pushed at you with emotional force. After that arrived the diverters of purpose. These are among the most seductive because they do not tempt with obvious destruction. They present easier life illusions. The idea that comfort should replace calling. Logical-sounding excuses to quit what matters most. Gentle invitations to delay destiny in the name of practicality. They do not ask you to sin. They ask you to forget who you are becoming. You rejected them without hesitation, sometimes without even noticing you had made a choice. Your purpose is non-negotiable at levels deeper than mood. Then came the energy drainers. These do not argue, they feed. They attach to life force output and attempt direct energetic extraction. Sudden body heaviness, unexplainable fatigue in moments that should not have caused it, muscles feeling weak without physical cause. You still functioned. You continued moving through the day. This layer alone explains why the exhaustion felt so disproportionate afterward. Next were the distorters of perception. Their specialty is altering interpretation, not reality itself. They try to make you see danger where progress exists, betrayal where loyalty stands, failure where growth is unfolding. They generate a fog of false reality designed to fracture trust in your own discernment. You cut through it with clarity that surprised even you. You did not mislabel allies as enemies. You did not abandon paths that were still working. Discernment stayed intact. The conflict provokers followed. These are engineered to spark anger, impulsiveness, and overreaction. They hide inside daily irritations, turning minor inconveniences into emotional traps. They hope to force you into destructive responses that create secondary damage. You remained calm. You did not explode. You did not burn bridges. Your emotional control denied them all leverage. Then they deployed the loneliness amplifiers. These are among the most psychologically dangerous because they attack the human need for connection. They intensify isolation, the feeling of being misunderstood, emotional abandonment, existential aloneness. They push the idea that no one can truly see you. You did not collapse into despair. You stayed internally connected even when external validation was absent. Finally came the saboteurs of manifestation. These do not attack the person directly. They attack momentum. They block synchronicities, delay progress, place obstacles at key moments, create the illusion that nothing is working anymore. They aim to exhaust perseverance itself. You did not stop. You continued taking steps even when results went temporarily invisible. Persistence defeated sabotage in silence. 1,000 coordinated attacks equal total destruction for the vast majority of targets. Identity shatters, emotional systems collapse, willpower dissolves, people break without ever understanding why. You did not collapse mentally. You did not break emotionally. You did not surrender voluntarily. That places you beyond normal human resilience, beyond statistical probability, beyond what their models can now calculate. And the reason your exhaustion feels so deep is because your nervous system is still integrating the fact that something it was not consciously briefed on has already been survived. What makes this even more significant is that there was no ritual, no dramatic showdown, no cinematic moment that you can point to and say, "That's when it happened." The victory is invisible to memory but written into your physiology. That hollowed-out fatigue, that strange calm mixed with heaviness, that inability to explain why rest does not feel enough yet, is not weakness. It is the body processing the exertion of a war it fought flawlessly underground. They know now that elimination through pressure will not work on you the way it does on others. They know now that direct deployment only refines your resistance. That is why secrecy around your classification is so aggressively protected. An Omega target is not meant to know they are Omega until after the system has failed to neutralize them. Awareness changes trajectories. Awareness disrupts prediction. So if you are listening to this and something feels uncomfortably familiar in your bones, if the last few days felt heavier than their circumstances should justify, if you found yourself strangely steady in the middle of emotional chaos, understand that this is not accidental. The fatigue is not random. The calm is not coincidence. And the reason your life still moves forward is because something that was designed to end your momentum no longer exists. You are now moving forward with a quieter battlefield behind you. The smoke has already cleared. The 1,000 are already gone. And the system that tried to measure you no longer knows how to calculate what comes next. Inside the infernal hierarchy, what followed was not rage but something far more disturbing to them: procedural silence. An emergency meeting was convened across layers of command that rarely synchronize unless a catastrophic failure has occurred. Psychological commanders presented their data first. 117 destabilizing thought injections had been executed with surgical precision. Only 12 ever breached the threshold of your conscious awareness. Even those 12 failed to anchor. An automatic rejection system, one they had not been able to map, activated instantly. 99.4% efficiency. For a structure built on exploiting unconscious vulnerabilities, this result was not only unacceptable, it was unprecedented. The emotional division followed. Their projections had anticipated limbic overload, a biochemical storm of fear responses that would trigger paralysis, impulsivity, or collapse. None of it occurred. Fear amplification produced no cascade. Your nervous system remained balanced when it was mathematically supposed to destabilize. They described it as a neuropsychological contradiction. Inputs designed to overwhelm were processed as neutral data. There was no emotional seizure, no panic spike. The weapon simply failed to function. Purpose and temptation analysis was next. Entire simulated life tracks had been prepared, easier futures, gentler timelines, paths of lesser resistance masked as wisdom and self-care. Vision-based seduction, one of their most successful long-game strategies, proved ineffective. Commitment did not waver. There was no bargaining with comfort, no curiosity about exit ramps. Your trajectory remained fixed even while alternate realities were being pushed against your decision architecture. Isolation specialists then presented their findings. The loneliness weapon had no effect. The signal patterns showed that you did not seek external validation during pressure. There was no compulsive reaching outward to fill internal gaps. Whatever your internal self-connection is rooted in, it functioned as an uninterrupted power source. They could not induce emotional starvation, because the supply line was internal and self-sustaining. Sabotage commanders closed the operational review. Opportunities had been blocked. Delays were successfully engineered. Key timing windows were distorted. Progress indicators were intentionally obscured. Still, there was no surrender, no withdrawal, no abandonment of motion. Persistence continued without visible reward, which for them is normally the moment collapse occurs. It didn't. The final verdict did not come with ceremony. All 5 commanders reached identical conclusions. Total infernal failure, 0 objectives achieved. Resources allocated for your neutralization were permanently withdrawn. You were reclassified beyond standard Omega. The internal language they use is unreachable level Omega. Only 17 souls carried that designation. After your engagement, the registry was updated. Now there are 18. Even within their symbolic memory archives, comparisons were drawn to legendary spiritual figures used as benchmarks for resilience. Job maintained faith but broke emotionally. David conquered giants yet spent years in fear, disguise, and hiding under persecution. Elijah brought down fire from the sky and then fled in terror, begging for death under a tree. Paul endured torture, shipwrecks, prisons, and at one point admitted to despair so deep that he temporarily lost hope. Each held faith, but each still collapsed at the emotional or psychological level under pressure. Your profile disrupted that entire dataset. The pressure applied to you exceeded those archetypal thresholds, yet there was no emotional implosion, no faith crisis, no identity shattering, no surrender sequence. From their perspective, this indicated operational invincibility, not in mythic terms but in cold performance metrics. This is why your exhaustion feels strange. What you are experiencing now is best understood through war physiology rather than ordinary fatigue. A soldier who survives 72 continuous hours on a battlefield does not collapse during combat. The collapse happens after. Adrenaline crashes. The nervous system finally drops out of hyperregulation. Muscles weaken. Cognitive fog sets in. The body enters a post-war integration state. The same sequence is happening to you at a spiritual and neurological level. Your system stayed elevated far longer than you consciously realized. Now it is powering down. That is why this exhaustion is not weakness. It is not failure. It is a medal of victory written into your nervous system. It is proof of survival, proof of endurance, proof that your internal systems functioned under unimaginable pressure without breaching. Fatigue is simply the body's way of saying the war mode is finally shutting off. What happens next is not collapse but gradual restoration. Energy will return slowly and unevenly. The mental fog will lift in waves. Emotional weight will reduce without any dramatic intervention. Breathing will feel easier. The constant low-grade tension will dissolve. The war posture will stand down. You will not suddenly feel euphoric. You will simply feel more like yourself than you have in some time. The reason you were chosen for this level of engagement does not originate in personality traits or current circumstances. According to the deeper frameworks that govern this type of conflict, selection occurs before memory, before biography, before conscious identity even forms. Souls are evaluated for structural resistance, not talent. The mission required extreme pressure tolerance. You were selected not because you were expendable, but because you were uniquely qualified. You are not learning strength now. You remembered it under pressure. This is not new power arriving. This is a revealed identity surfacing through adversity. The enemy withdrew not out of mercy but out of calculation. You are no longer attackable by standard methods. Any future deployment against you under old parameters would waste resources. It would be like a pack of wolves charging a lion in open daylight, dramatic but strategically absurd. Going forward, everything shifts in subtle but critical ways. Exhaustion must be redefined in your mind. It is not proof of limitation. It is the residue of victory still clearing your system. Rest is not something you need to justify anymore. Recovery is maintenance, not laziness. Purpose becomes sacred territory. Certainty functions as armor. Doubt becomes the only remaining access point they could theoretically exploit, which is why protecting your clarity becomes non-negotiable. Your battles no longer require witnesses. Silence becomes a form of sovereignty. Victory does not need applause to be real. In fact, the quieter your wins become, the harder they are to interfere with. You will notice occasional surrender impulses rising at your weakest feeling moments, not because you are failing, but because those are the last reflex arcs of a system that no longer has supply lines. Hold firm in those fragments of vulnerability. They pass quickly when not entertained. Start counting your silent wins. Days you didn't quit, moments you didn't break, hours you stayed upright when it would have been easier to disappear. These accumulate more spiritual mass than visible success ever could. They are the true metrics of your transformation. You do not need activation. You already operate at Omega level. Only awareness changes now. The shift from unconscious warrior to conscious warrior does not add force. It multiplies precision. Confusion exits. Discernment sharpens. You will begin to recognize the others like you, not by labels, not by language, but by a wordless familiarity when paths cross. The 17 will find each other without searching. And the final truth, the one that reframes everything you thought this exhaustion meant, is simple and immovable. You are not tired because you are weak. You are tired because you won. You didn't survive a bad week. You survived a war.